as a founder, you can only do so much and you can only do so many things that delegation and delegating is just critical. So you need to find people who you trust and that who can execute without micromanagement.
Welcome to When You Grow Up, the podcast for conversations between students with goals and the people who have already achieved them. Brought to you by Hopkins Connect at Johns Hopkins University. In this podcast, we match students for a conversation with their dream mentor. Here's our student host for today's episode.
My name is Ria Golecha. I'm from Jaipur, Rajasthan in India. I'm currently a student studying the Masters of Public Health degree at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Kavi Misri, who is the founder of ROSE, which stands for Recognition of Speech and Emotion, a startup which has a focus on smarter mental health.
Hi, my name is Kavi Misri. I am from New York. I am the founder and CEO of Rose Health, a digital mental health platform. I studied healthcare management at Hopkins at the Kavi Business School while doing my MBA.
You're listening to the When You Grow Up podcast. So thank you, Kavi, for your time here. And it's really a pleasure to meet you here. So I'm currently a Masters of Public Health student at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. So just to let you know that I had a background in economics and I switched to public health. So far, I've worked for World Health Organization, the Global Health Strategies Group, and IQVIA, which is also a public healthcare consulting firm, all based in New Delhi and Sri Lanka. Currently, I'm pursuing my track course in health systems and policy. And right after graduation, I'll be heading to Seniors Health, which is a biopharma consulting firm based in San Francisco in California. So my first question to you is that you've worked in investment banking, corporate strategy, corporate mergers and acquisitions. And in all these career choices, what really has been the driving factor for you to pick up a job or to pick up a degree or a course?
Of course, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Ria. Congratulations on graduating in May, and another congratulations on your new position in San Francisco. So what has led me to my path towards becoming an entrepreneur or to become an investment banker or an operator at Northwell Health has really been my love or my focus on healthcare. Healthcare has been a big part of my life, actually, from the first day I was born. This is a bit kind of very personal, but I was born with a congenital heart defect, which is essentially a hole in your heart. And during that process, I underwent 2 open heart surgeries at the ages of 1 and 3. And as I grew up, I always wondered, why am I the only child or the only kid running around the playground with a massive T on my chest? And that really got me interested in healthcare, more so trying to understand why this happened to me and what I should be doing in order for me to take better care of myself as I grow older. And that turned into a love of healthcare and a mission of wanting to continue to improve technologies that would improve the lives or the likelihood of someone with a congenital heart defect surviving if given the right tools and procedures. And at a young age, I started reading and learning more about healthcare. And to be quite honest, I would have loved to become a cardiovascular surgeon, but up until today, I'm still traumatized by needles. So that definitely didn't seem like a good fit. I went to Fordham University. I studied finance. I fell in love with purely mergers and acquisitions. And then I took that passion for healthcare and merged that passion with mergers and acquisitions by joining the healthcare group for JP Morgan as well as the M&A group for SunTrust Robinson Humphrey, and was able to marry two things that I loved, which was the financial modeling as well as healthcare, and the underlying goal or the underlying belief or driver was the fact that I knew that by working on healthcare M&A in investment banking, I would be able to work on deals where I can have a lasting impact. I'd be able to generate synergies through an acquisition, and also I'd be in a position where I'd work on new technologies as well that can help others. And most importantly, be in a position where I'm able to make care much easier and more accessible to the end users and our patients. And that driving force is really what has allowed me to build a successful career in investment banking, as well as at Northwell Health as a young executive, and to now be the founder of Rose Health.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your personal story. And it's just really, really inspiring to hear how you're so passionate about healthcare innovation as well as delivery. And now, currently, Kavi, you have a startup, which is basically a population health SaaS company, which is leveraging artificial intelligence to simplify the process for patients to receive and seek mental health care. And your startup is helping detect early depression as well as mood disorders really quickly. Do you think it's important to work in a professional work environment like you did for investment banking or for different corporates before you started your own startup? Would you recommend this kind of a career trajectory of moving from a full-time professional workforce to a startup? How easy was it for you to switch that lifestyle from a 9 to 5, or if it's investment banking, I'll say 9 to 11, or maybe more. But just wanted to learn that, did it really help you, and would you recommend that path to someone else, or is it fine to just start right away whenever you want?
Sure. And those are all great questions. I would say that in my personal experience, I came to Johns Hopkins with my product already partially developed and worked on fine-tuning and continuing to develop and network and build the company while going through Johns Hopkins as a student. Now, one of the most important pieces of starting a business, which a lot of people get wrong and unfortunately leads to wasted time, wasted resources, and a problem that just gets unsolved, is the fact that people tend to try to solve a problem with the idea that they know what problem that should be solved, whereas the proper way of doing it should be to conduct customer discovery and be able to look at least or meet at least 100 stakeholders and speak with them about the specific problem that you're going after and get their input on whether this product can really be sold. Is there really a market for this product? And in healthcare, for example, it's helpful for you to interview folks like the end user. If you're developing a company like Rose, you'd want to talk to the end user. You'd want to talk to potential clients or targets, such as physician groups, accountable care organizations, health systems, health plans, employers, deep tech experts. All of those folks should be a priority to not sell your product, but sell the problem and see if there's an interest or there is a way of actually solving this problem. And I would highly recommend that a successful entrepreneur or entrepreneur who's serious about this has work experience. Because as a CEO, it's very difficult. There is in investment banking, there definitely is no 9 to 5. There isn't even a lunch break. We're lucky if we even get to 9 to 11. And I think that really allowed me to have the grit and the ability to communicate with executives while I did deals. And it gave me that leadership ability that has allowed me to grow Rose, and also has allowed me to grow Rose at a max velocity where I've had the pleasure of working on deals where everything needs to be done yesterday. And as a result of that, it has trained me to work smarter rather than harder. And I do believe if you do come out of school and you go straight from your undergrad and you go right into your MBA and you try to start a business, the chances of you being successful is very slim. And I've seen it multiple times from folks at Carey as well as at Bloomberg and Kennedy, where that is the case. So in order to really be successful, you do need to have that domain experience, and you need to do that customer discovery.
Sure. Thank you so much for your answer. So I'll just pivot to the next point that I really wanted to ask you was that, at a stage in career, like I'm currently 25 years old, and there's a kind of a corpus that I want to build for myself so that I have a financial backing ready whenever I'm ready to take that plunge and risk into a startup, because a startup is not only investment in terms of money, it's time, effort, a lot of different sacrifices that you make to put together a company. So could you let us know a ballpark time and the kind of a mental state wherein you thought that you were ready to give in your energy into a startup, and was there like a kind of a corpus amount you were looking at that you had to be ready with before you could take that plunge? And was an MBA required to make you successful in the startup that you've currently built?
Yeah, and those are actually great questions, Ria. For someone that's in their early 20s, the responsibility and financial capacity is definitely limited. And in my case, I think it was a little bit different, given that I had started working for a private equity firm in my senior year of college, and that was a very lucrative position. And investment banking also is a very lucrative job. And as a result of that, I had the right amount, or I had a decent amount of money that I was able to spend to bootstrap the company while also build Rose. When it comes to making the plunge, I think it's really a matter on when you're at a point of frustration with a problem, or you've been affected by a problem and you just can't take it anymore. Like, you just don't understand why things are being done this way, and then why the status quo has to be this way. And I can give an example that happened to me, and what made me take the plunge was after working the 80 to 100-hour work weeks for 7 years, doing investment banking and working at Northwell, I finally burned out. And I fell into my own depression when I burned out, and I learned very quickly that depression is not a passive state. It might seem that way to people on the outside, but to the person depressed, it's just an active state of pain that really takes over your entire body, from the tip of your hair all the way to the bottom of your feet. And I was bedridden with depression for about a month, and at that point I had the wherewithal and the support to seek care, and I experienced mental health care for the first time, and I was just blown away by the inefficiencies in not just accessing care, but purely navigating the mental health care ecosystem. And I decided to do something about it. I saw my friends and colleagues going through similar concerns. So I leveraged my experience as an investor, as an entrepreneur, but most importantly as a patient to build Rose into what it is today. And it is with that personal passion and the the push to solve the problem and challenge status quo to provide a solution that I knew based on my experience. And this piggybacks to your previous question that with my experience of understanding the intricacies of the healthcare ecosystem, especially on the investment side and the provider side, I was able to determine that a problem like this can only really be solved by leveraging technology to augment care and not by throwing bodies at the problem, because there just aren't any bodies to throw at the problem given the amount of folks who are affected and need mental health services versus the number that are able to provide these mental health services. And I think that was a personal decision for me, not wanting anyone else to feel the pain that I felt for that month, and for being able to create a solution, which I'm very happy to say, Rose is now the exact solution that would have prevented my burnout 3.5 years ago. And also being ready to take on the role as an entrepreneur, starting from scratch, giving up your lofty salaries, and being able to solve that problem. I think grit and passion are the two things that you'll need to survive as an entrepreneur, especially as a founder. And in the case of an MBA, I would say 90% of what I build in Rose, or actually 95% of what I built on Rose, was just through my experience at work. And I would say 5% of the MBA contributed to me building Rose.
Yeah. These are absolutely great insights. And I think, as someone who is also contemplating whether to do an MBA degree after one master's degree, it also gives a real life perspective on what you felt about education. And while I would definitely agree that it does help you make the contacts that you make and meet the people you meet, but there's also an opportunity cost to it. So I think it'll be a person to person basis when you make decisions like this.
Yeah, and actually, let me make a caveat to that. So I would say that 95% of the MBA, as far as the academics of it and the classes, were not conducive to building Rose. However, if we were to talk about how Rose was, by going through Johns Hopkins and the services or tech ventures, as well as Fast Forward You, as well as the network of being in this MBA has helped with growing Rose, I would say that would be 95% of helping with Rose, because I was able to build. I was very fortunate to be part of the Social Innovation Lab, to initially move to Baltimore to begin the process of continuing building it out through that. Then met my chief medical officer, who's an attending neuropsychiatrist at Hopkins, met my chief R&D officer, who was a department head of the Department of Mental Health at Bloomberg. And then it kind of really just ended up having a ripple effect of bringing on people from Hopkins. So I would say that the classes itself are not really relevant, but the network itself is what was definitely worth the time and effort and money.
Sure. That leads me to my next question, which is when you were building your company, I know there must be strategy, operations, finance, which were the pillars on what you wanted to build your company in. And I do know that you come from an undergrad background in finance, and then you switched to a healthcare management track when you were with Kerry Business School. You must have needed people who come from a technology background. And as a founder and a CEO of a company, you might be at a position where you had to evaluate their work or judge who to hire. So, coming from a background which was different than a technology background, how did you make those choices? Did you hire another co founder or another team member who was good with these? But how did you balance hiring when you were not coming from the background that your company was built in?
Yeah, I was just so fortunate to be able to meet my chief medical officer early on, Dr. Matthew Peters. He is an attending neuropsychiatrist at Johns Hopkins, and he was responsible for building the clinical direction of the company while also meeting, and Dr. Matthew Peters introduced me to Dr. Atif Adam, our chief R&D officer, who focused on R&D and clinical research and the tech aspects of building the company. So it was with Matt and Atif that we built Rose to what it is today. And they had the domain expertise in the individual fields. And when building Rose, I decided to spend pretty much all of the funding and all of the bootstrapping money on purely technology as well as science, and more deep technology and deep science. So while I took care of the operations, took care of the finances, made sure that I was able to be the one that is the face of Rose, that's getting investors, getting investments, getting closing deals, they were also there to help and to help facilitate and close these deals, but their focus was really on building the platform to the level that it is today. And then after we've continued and we've raised our seed round, that's when we were able to hire more folks and hired more folks on the science side, more engineers, more product managers, and ultimately work to take Rose to the next step. And it was with Matt and Atif who would oversee those folks while I still continue to fundraise. It seems like I'll always be fundraising every single day of my life with a startup. But it was really important to have the trust and to have this relationship with Matt and Atif, knowing that they have similar goals, that they have the stamina and they have the passion and they have the grit to kind of go at this and be able to create this beautiful solution that we've built.
Sure. I think that beautifully flows into my next question, which is that, in a land of entrepreneurs, is America really doing enough for immigrants? Because a recent report stated that immigrants in America were more likely to start businesses than members of the native population. But to do so, they first need investment and they need credit. And I'm not sure if were you born here or were you from another country and you traveled here? What were your experiences in this sector, and how conducive did you feel was the environment in America?
This is a very dicey question, which may or may not. I'm not sure if it will be best to put this in your. So I agree with your sentiment that it is difficult for an immigrant to come into the United States and be in a position to acquire funding. In my case, I was born in Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, and I moved to the United States when I was 9. So I at least grew up here for the most part, and then attended college at Fordham University, and then at Hopkins for my MBA. I think the differentiator with me was the fact that I had the investment banking career and the investment banking opportunity, which made it a bit easier for me with funding, just given the network. But I still think that founders of color or female founders especially have such a difficult time getting funded. Less than 3% of all funding resources are spent on female founders. And I think it's really a Silicon Valley type of thing that continues. I do see it changing as we put more as we get more into making things a little bit more equal. But I really do think that it's the average. I would say if you have a certain background from a certain school, like an Ivy League, you would have a better chance. And if you are not an immigrant, you'd have a better chance of raising funds.
So, Kavi, you've talked about your experiences so far and what led you to make the choices you made. And as you navigated these decisions, were there some habits that you developed over time which helped you overcome all the challenges and, meet your goals? And is there something that, particularly one or two habits that you'd like to recommend all of us who are listening to this podcast to also maybe take up?
Sure. I have to straightly say that there is no rosy story when it comes to being an entrepreneur. Every single day is hard. Every single day you're going out there, you're getting punched in the face like twice a day, which would be an investor telling you no, or getting a business development deal that falls through. There's nothing to prepare you for that, to be quite honest. And your mental health is affected by these ups and downs. It is a true roller coaster ride. I would say that my team is what has allowed me to continue doing what I'm doing. And the support of my family has also been a huge impact. I was asked by Johnson & Johnson Labs about what are some things that I do in the morning, or what do I do in the morning and what do I do at night every day as a startup founder. And I would really love to say that I wake up at 6 a.m., I read the Financial Times for 30 minutes. I look at the news for 30 minutes. I have breakfast. I go and I'm able to exercise for an hour. I'm able to do some mindfulness for half an hour. And then I start work at around 8 o'clock. And then I'm able to have breaks between the day, and I'm able to shut off at night. But none of that is true. My hours range from all the way from 6 at most times to 2 a.m. I get to the point where I go straight into my work. There's no meditation. There's no mindfulness. I've tried it. So there isn't a rosy story being a founder. It's filled with ups and downs. The ups are great. The downs are a pain, but the ups make up for it. And the ability to just keep going and taking care of your body is also a sacrifice. And that's even with perfect delegation, right? Being able to delegate your work properly, but still, it's so difficult to be in a position to take the time that's needed. But hey, I do run a mental health startup, so I do recommend that you do take your breaks and that you take the time to meditate, and you take the time to kind of reflect at the end of the day as well as be in a position where you can remove yourself from the situation. And I'll make one last comment here. I started recently is actually playing video games, so sports video games. I've been a huge fan of sports. I am a huge fan of sports and collectibles, and NBA and Madden are my two favorite games. And I've realized that during that time of playing the game, that's the only time I do not think about risk. And that's actually how I unwind at night, is that I would play one or two games, and then that puts me in a good position to go to bed.
I think that quick recharge is really needed when you're doing something as intensive as a startup of your own. My last question to you, Kavi, would be that, ideas at times are just like rabbits. You get a couple and you learn how to handle them, and pretty soon you have like a dozen of ideas. So identifying that one right idea, which looks like work to others, but it feels like play to you, is really important when you finally narrow down on a concept of a startup. So, like, if you had to give me 5 points on just the discussion of pitfalls to avoid when you're selecting a startup idea topic, could you please give me 5 pointers on what are the pitfalls that we should avoid when we're selecting a topic to start our startup on?
Sure. So first and foremost, I would say doing your customer discovery. So being able to understand that the problem that you're trying to solve is actually a problem that needs to be solved, and that there is a market that's willing to pay for that product to sell your service, and then for you to then create your service. The second is to really trust your team and really make your team members more of a family, because you will be spending more time with your team than your family. And you need, as a founder, you can only do so much, and you can only do so many things, that delegation and delegating is just critical. So you need to find people who you trust and who can execute without micromanagement. I do not micromanage at all. I had one of the greatest parts of what I've done is adding a chief of staff, and everything funnels through my chief of staff, and everything gets done perfectly. And I think that is I would say that's number 3. If you have the opportunity, get a chief of staff. Or in certain cases, and I wasn't able to get a chief of staff until, I would say, after our seed round. But having Deanna Smith, our chief of staff, that was pretty critical. The fourth, I would say, would be manage your money. Manage your cash flow. Pay very close attention to your burn rate. Be very careful with the way that you structure the company, especially as you do it for the first time. Spend the money on proper legal services to advise you on how to structure the company and how to structure the agreements. And then lastly, I'd say, if you ever doubt yourself and you ever doubt what you're doing, then this isn't for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was an absolutely inspiring conversation with you. Thank you so much, Kavi, for your time to speak with me today.
My pleasure, Ria. It's been an absolute pleasure, and best of luck to you as well as you continue your future endeavors.
You have been listening to When You Grow Up, the podcast for conversations between students with goals and the people who have already achieved them. Thank you to our When You Grow Up podcast student team and all the people who make this podcast possible, including our editors, Thomas Nishimoto and Josh Felton, our relationship associates, Camille Blake and Laura Flynn, our marketing coordinator, Himanshi Sharma, our project manager, Ben Stevens, our host students, and all of our guests.